Welcome back to Broken Bobby's Transformation Page. If you are new to the page, in 1990 I became involved in the drug gang world. From 92 to '06, I spent a lot of time incarcerated. I tell these stories to let you know it don't have to be you. If you're young and thinking about trying something or you're figuring out how to get out, these are my stories of this lifestyle and how it affected me, and eventually I got out and transformed my life. So let's get into today's story. Today's story is going to be about the big homies getting kicked out of the SHU. This happened, I want to say, around 2015, and I was not there when this happened. I had been out for a while already, but I know a couple people that were there when this was all going down, and I basically got their take on the situation. So they called it the end to all hostilities, and basically it was a peace treaty amongst four, the big four in the California prison system. I don't really get into naming these groups, but in the California prison system, there's four big groups basically that control everything, and a lot of these guys were locked up in the secure housing unit for decades. Basically, if you got validated, then they would stick you in Pelican Bay, Corcoran, or wherever there was a SHU program available to house these guys long term. So, like I said, according to what I was told, around 2015, these guys started hitting the mainline. The heavy hitters, the legends, whatever you want to call them, but the guys, the movers and the shakers of the prison system. And as these guys started hitting the yards, what I was told was the atmosphere completely changed. And the best way to describe it is you have a bunch of foot soldiers that were taking care of business for these guys. And it's like, if the boss ain't around, you're going to take care of business, but you're going to take care of business your way. When the boss shows up, all of a sudden you start doing everything by the book. And this is sort of what happened on these level 4 180 yards, which are SHU kickout yards. So if you do a SHU term and you got, like, you weren't necessarily indeterminate SHU, but say you put in some work on the yard and you stab somebody, you may go back, get sent back to the SHU for 2 years or whatever it may be. And when you kick out to these yards, these level 4 180s. And what a level 4 180 is, as I understand it, is it's similar to a 270 in a way, but it's broken into sections. So what it does is it reduces the number of inmates in any particular area at any given time. So it's easier to control situations. Now, these guys start hitting the yard, and some of these guys are mortal enemies. Some of these guys have been enemies for decades. And with the end of all hostilities, basically that done away with the major riot type events. So these guys kick out, and the story I was told was there was something brewing. It was getting ready to kick off, basically, between a couple of these groups on the yard, and they had sent word ahead that they were coming, and I don't know if they called them on their cell phone or how that worked, but they had sent word ahead basically that everything, there weren't going to be any issues anymore. So imagine if you were a lifer on this yard, or even not a lifer, if you had been there for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it may be, and you're used to doing things a certain way, and now all of a sudden somebody shows up and says we're not going to do it that way no more. Like, this is kind of a culture shock for some of these guys. A lot of convicts see crime as their career, and all of a sudden they're things changed. So now, like, the respect level went even higher, and it had to be confusing for some of these guys, I would imagine, because you looking at the other group and you're saying that's the enemy for all these years, and now all of a sudden someone comes and says that's not the enemy no more. Now, these groups, as I understand it, still were doing their own thing, and there were some trust issues, because, like I said, some of these wars have been going on for decades. So this led to a lot of inmates going over to the SNY side because they just didn't know how to deal with this new situation. Like I said, all of a sudden there's no more riots, and you think of it this way: when you have a section that's got 100 men in it, and these are all level 4 GP killers, basically. So now you don't have a common enemy. So these violent people need to find a way to be violent still. So the violence became internal. If you're not looking over there like, yeah, that's the guy, all of a sudden the politics started kicking up, and there became a lot more internal violence. An example, white on white. So, back when I was doing time, if something came up on your name or something, there might be a kite sent out to the main line saying, hey, we need Bobby to check in back here in the SHU. And basically what that meant was that I'm going to go stab somebody on the yard, and that way I get myself back to the SHU so I could either get that worked out or get stabbed myself. It may sound kind of funny to some of you that have never been in the California prison system, but that was the reality for a long time. But now with these big homies on the yard, there was no longer a need to check into the SHU. So when somebody messes up on these yards now, you're not getting checked anymore. These guys are trying to take your wind. And think of it like the example I gave earlier. Think of it this way: when the boss is around, you're always trying to show out because you're trying to advance your career, and that's what a lot of these guys are doing. So now, they tap you and say, "That's the guy, hit him." You and whoever else is going on him, you're trying to put that demo down for your big homies, because ultimately a lot of these guys, that's their goal as well. So things just got really crazy. And from what I understand, a lot of the big homies, like the guys that were running the yard prior to them showing up, now they were part of the squad, I guess you would say. And it was like almost impossible. Like, these guys were definitely unapproachable. You couldn't get near them. And as I was told, if you had something to say to them, like if you're lucky, maybe you could write out a kite and hand it to somebody and get it passed to them, and you may or may not get a response, depending on who you are. because these guys were so insulated that nobody was getting near them. And it kind of raises a question to me, because when I was doing time, if there were more than two of you walking on the track, like the COs would get on you and tell you to break it up. Basically, they didn't want grouping going on, because that was one of the signs that there could be trouble brewing. So, yeah, it's a different time in there now. And the reason I told this story was someone had asked me if I was on the yard when the big homies got out, and no, I wasn't. But I do know, like I said, I do know a few people that were. So if you like this sort of content, then please subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and if you know anything about this stuff, drop a comment. If I'm wrong on anything, like I talked to two different sources, but if you know something more, definitely drop a comment and let me know what was really going on. So family, fitness, and freedom. With these things, you won't have to worry about those, being in these type of situations and learning how that stuff works. So yeah, just don't look at the mountain, just start climbing.